This account pertains to my current upstairs neighbor. He disappears for weeks at a time, and then will suddenly hear what sounds like a slaughterhouse happening at 11 p.m. on a weeknight, announcing that he's now home. There's been a lot of things that have happened, but the top two that pretty much sum up everything you need to know about just how creepy this guy is this. One day I was bringing up groceries and he offered to help. I told him thank you and assumed that he would just take the bags to the second floor landing, place them outside the door, and then continue up to his apartment, like our other neighbor who has done this exact thing before. He follows me back out to my car and then stands about 4 inches behind me as I lean into the trunk of my car to get the last 2 bags. He takes all of the bags and then walks upstairs. As I finish saying the, "Oh, thank you, you really didn't have to do that," lines and unlock my door, he goes, "Oh, it's no problem. I know your old man leaves for work early and you're home alone." I barely open the door enough to walk into my apartment before I can turn around, and he's walked in. He opened up my fridge and puts the milk in, and he starts looking around our apartment and into our bedroom. And now, just for context of why I didn't flip out and start screaming, it was 8 in the morning and the 2 other people who live in our building were gone, so literally no one would have heard me. He's probably 6'2" and I'm 5'5" if I have on some thick shoes, and I say, "Okay, thanks for the help, I'll see you around." And he continues to dig through the fridge and looking towards my bed. Then he turns and starts stepping towards me. And then he realizes that I have a very large butcher knife 4 inches away from my hand. And then he chooses to leave. I call my husband, who's at work an hour away, crying, and tell him what just happened. That night he goes to confront the guy, and he won't answer the door. And so my husband goes up the next day, and the guy breaks down crying and tells my husband he doesn't remember anything and he's so sorry and he was just trying to be very neighborly. And my husband just tells him, "My wife's a tough girl and she can carry the groceries up herself." Sometime later we woke up one night hearing someone yelling and screaming outside. When we look out our living room window, we see the upstairs creeper with blood streaming down his face. He could barely stand, screaming at the police, "I'm not going to the damn hospital." Apparently, he had gotten into a fight at the pool hall down the street with 4 or 5 other guys and gotten his ass kicked. Eventually, the cops got a hold of him and took him to the hospital in cuffs. And the next morning, I went to go get groceries alone, and my husband didn't have to work that day. When I came home, he was standing outside smoking a cigarette, and you could tell that he was still messed up from whatever he was on the night before. This time, he walked straight up to the car and acted like he was waiting for me to get out, but he stood by the trunk. This was also the first time that I had seen him since the initial incident that he could have thought my husband wasn't home. I called my husband, and when he saw that I was on the phone and heard my husband coming down the stairs to the building, he took off running around the corner. My husband took me to the store that day and got me a gun. And now anytime he sees me alone, he just stares, but if my husband is around, he acts like he doesn't even see us. And now I know this might come across as a sort of dumb idiot just whining about her antisocial neighbors, but sometimes I get really scared being here whenever my husband isn't around, and since writing all of this down has made me feel just a little bit less alone, I guess it was worth it.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
I wanted to tell you guys about my mentally unstable neighbour, who I will be calling Kay to respect her privacy. Because I don't want to call her crazy or anything else that contributes to the stigmatism of severe mental illness, this story isn't going to be exaggerated to be more creepy than what it was. It's just what happened. Now, we had just moved into our new home, which we had recently built in a town in Texas, It started when my parents began finding small pills strewn about our backyard near the fences, just a few here and there. We googled the numbers on the pills to find most of them were antidepressants, but I can't remember the exact names, as this was about a year ago or so. But I think there was at least one pill that Google said was an antipsychotic medication. We were pretty confused, but mostly worried about our dog eating them before we could find them all. This kept happening over a few weeks, and then we found unopened water and Gatorade bottles thrown over our fence. The side of the house this was coming from had a somewhat empty lot next door. We had soon-to-be neighbours building their new house there, but it wasn't like the construction workers were throwing their trash over our fence. These bottles were unopened and full. For reference, Kay lives a few houses down from mine on the corner. Between our house and hers are 2 empty lots, the lot closest to us with a new house being built. After another week or so of this came the fights, or maybe incidents I should call them. Kay would routinely storm out of her house and go yell at the construction workers. I don't know what about, but apparently about nonsense things. Sometimes she would yell from her yard, sometimes she would walk onto the lot to yell. Several times she was seen yelling at no one, just standing in the lot or walking around the construction supplies and arguing to herself. By now, most of the people on our street knew her and were afraid of her. Up to this point, I have never seen Kay. I attended university an hour away and was only home on the weekends. One weekend, my parents left me home alone in the middle of the day. I think they were at the gym or the grocery store. I'm an only child too, and I had just gotten out of the shower and walked downstairs to hear yelling. I took a look out the windows to see a middle-aged blonde lady arguing. I couldn't see who she was talking to, but I couldn't hear another male voice. Now, I had not met Kay yet, but I also hadn't met my new neighbours. So my first thought was that this was the new couple building next door, my new neighbours. It seemed like they were arguing about the house. After a few minutes, the blonde lady walked away, and then a couple came out of the unfinished house. They got into their car and parked on the street. I was really confused at this point, especially when the man walked over to my door and rang the doorbell. I'm very introverted, so I opted not to answer the door. Stupid, I know. My parents weren't home anyway, so it wouldn't have made a difference, I thought. After a minute, he walked back to his car, and from the window I could see he was sitting there on the driver's side doing something. He came back with a note that he left on my door, and then he and his wife drove away. After I was sure they were gone, I got the note and read it. Apparently my neighbours were checking out the house when they saw Kay, the blonde lady, attempting to get into my backyard. They confronted her, and that's what the yelling was. In a rush, I sent a picture of the note to my mum and called her, etc., but she didn't seem that worried about it. I knew that we always left the back door unlocked during the day, though. If she had gotten through our fence gates, she could have easily walked inside the house while I was home alone. After that, my stepdad got some new locks for the little gate doors at the front of our house. Things continued like this for a while, with Kay trying to get into our backyard, throwing pills and water bottles over our fence. A couple of times she was rummaging around our front flower beds too. And there was one instance which really unnerved my parents. We have a small alleyway that runs behind our house, connecting everyone's driveways. And another neighbour, who lives across the alleyway from us, contacted my parents to let them know they had seen Kay looming around our back fence at 3 a.m. that night. Not sure why those neighbours were awake at that time, but they said Kay was just standing there in the middle of the alleyway, staring at our back fence. Knowing we had someone essentially casing our house in the middle of the night, it was really starting to freak us out. The guy who built our house, who I'm naming Jay, somehow got in contact with someone who knew Kay's family pretty well. Everyone was wanting answers as to why Kay was acting like this, and since Jay had built most of the houses in the area and was well connected, people were asking him. I think he was friends with the realtor who sold the house to Kay, but I'm not sure. But Jay was able to give us a lot of information about her. Apparently her family was rich and owned a very big corporation, like one of the biggest in the US, and her family had essentially placed her in this house away from the rest of them, as they didn't want to deal with her mental illnesses. But more importantly, 2 years ago, her only son died of a drug overdose, and she's been unstable ever since. I'm not sure if she thinks we're holding him hostage, or his ghost is here or what. But that's why. She's been to several psychiatric hospitals throughout her life, and now she's stopped taking her medication because she's throwing it over our fence. Things finally came to a head in January of 2020, when during one of her usual arguments with the construction workers, she pulled out a BB gun. She was already very aggressive, so the BB gun just made things 100 times worse. I don't know if she just threatened to shoot them or if she actually did, but the cops were called regardless. It took them a while to talk her down, with several police officers swarming the street with big guns. I'm thankful that my parents had been filing police reports, so when they came they knew about Kay's history of mental illness. I'm both grateful and a little surprised that they handled the situation so well, because not a lot of police departments properly train their officers to deal with mentally ill patients, especially ones experiencing psychosis. Anyway, after that incident, Kay was not seen for a long time. We heard she was in a psychiatric hospital for many months, after which she returned to our neighborhood. She's doing much better now. She no longer does any of the strange behaviors she used to, and almost every day, me and my parents see her walk her dog past our house. She's clearly sticking to her routine, and I'm happy for her.
I live in a small rural community in the eastern United States. It's a nice little town, and because of my work in the medical field, I've met some interesting folks. I'm also familiar with law enforcement and emergency personnel. Small town life is not as dull and uneventful as people think, especially since everybody knows somebody who knows somebody. I have a lot of stories to share, but since this one just happened, I'll start here. Because it's still very recent and the investigation is ongoing, I have to be vague with some details, but I needed to tell someone. I'm single and live alone. Due to a stalker, I've moved twice, but that's another story for another time. However, it is relevant for this story for multiple reasons. The first reason being that I have a dog for the sake of protection, as well as have motion sensors and outdoor security cameras. The second reason being the location of my home, which is literally down the street from the fire department. I can see it from my living room window right now, and a couple of blocks from the police station. However, next to the fire department is the road department, which is basically a parking lot where they park their road equipment and empty garage trucks at night and on weekends. Oddly, it doesn't have a security camera. Small town life, I suppose. My house sits on a hill with a good view of that side of the street. Due to the incline, the large trees in the front yard, and the half cornfield in the property next to me, most people in the street below wouldn't notice me in the backyard unless they were actively looking. However, I can see the street clearly. This incident happened Saturday evening. The county was holding its annual Independence Day spiel with a community barbecue, music, fireworks, etc. I didn't attend because it's just not my thing. Plus, I have a dog and the sound of fireworks could be traumatizing, as I'm sure many of you know. Before the big show, I took the dog out to relieve herself in the backyard. There was still at least an hour of daylight, but the entire neighborhood was pretty quiet because most everyone was at the fairgrounds or various other holiday events. So when an unfamiliar, large white pickup drove slowly down the street, I noticed. It must have turned around at the end of the street because I saw it again, moving in the opposite direction only about 20 seconds later. This time it turned into the parking lot of the road department. Now, people have been known to toss things into the empty garage trucks, usually at night to avoid getting caught, because they don't want to or they're unable to make the trip to the landfill themselves. Usually it's things like furniture or broken equipment, but I didn't see any of those things in the back of this truck. The driver was a somewhat stocky guy of average height. He took 3 large black trash bags from the bed of his truck and tossed them one by one into the hopper of the garbage truck. Then he left. Now, I swear I'm not one of those meddling rear window types who always thinks activity is suspicious and that their neighbors are up to no good, but something about this didn't sit right with me. Normally, when I see people tossing their garbage into the trucks and leaving, I don't bother reporting it because it's relatively harmless. But this time, I had a gut feeling. So I called the police. If anything, they could get the guy for illegally dumping trash from a barbecue or whatever. While I'm on the phone with dispatch, I put my dog inside to cut down on distractions while the officers investigate. A few minutes later, an officer arrived and I crossed the street to meet him, gave him a description of the events, and pointed out which of the trucks the man had tossed the bags. He found the bags, took photos. He put on gloves and told me to stay back. The bags were tied in a knot at the top, and it took him a minute to untie one because of the gloves and how tight the knot was. But eventually he got it open, looked inside for a few seconds, then twisted it closed and took a few steps back. "Dear God," he hissed under his breath. "What?" "It's a body." I felt sick. I could tell he felt sick too. I saw him grow pale. His hand was trembling when he held the radio. Even his voice was shaking as he gave the code to dispatch. The dispatcher sounded confused when she asked him to repeat it. Within 10 minutes, the county sheriff was on the scene. Even he looked sick at the contents of the bag. The coroner arrived about 10 minutes after that, and the first officer walked me back to the house along with another one who arrived at the same time as the coroner. Though I showed the first cop via the app on my phone when I described the events initially, I now showed them the video on a larger screen. The camera caught footage of the truck as it drove by both times, as well as pulling into the parking lot, though unfortunately not a clear view of the license plate or the man tossing the bags out of frame. We watched the footage over and over, pausing frames, the officers taking notes. Ultimately, they requested this footage as well as a copy of the files from the past week to see if the truck had been in the area before. I've also been saving footage until the road department installs their own camera this week. Because this is still fresh, I don't know many more details. I know the body was in pieces, as they said, but I don't know the age of the victim, the gender, cause of death, any of that. Information hasn't been released to the public yet. I don't know if the coroner has ever been able to identify the body yet. A police cruiser has been parked at the fire department next door for constant surveillance in case the guy comes back. The guy who dumped the body was likely a local. How else would he know that he could dump there? He probably thought it'd get buried in other people's illegal trash accumulated over the holiday weekend, and the sanitation crew wouldn't have bothered to investigate. When I think about how this guy lives in my community, it makes me physically ill. To think that he had clearly scouted the area for a dump site, that it may not have been the first time this had happened, that this could happen again. If I hadn't called it in, if I hadn't been in the backyard at the exact moment, or if I had ignored that gut feeling, the victim would have never been found, may never find potential justice. Their loved ones may never have closure. In fact, there's a possibility that it might just happen again to another poor soul, and I just hope that it's not me.